This is a reading from the mystical city of God, the Conception. I'm going to pick up where I left off yesterday because it was a long reading. I'll overlap slightly. Let them flow from the hollow of his hands, filled with hyacinths into thine, Canticle chapter 5, verse 14, and from thine to thy devout servants, in order that the angels may bless him, the just magnify him, and the sinners seek him. Let all of them see the example of thy highest sanctity and purity, and by the grace of thy most holy Son, let me be favored with this mirror and efficacious rule by which I can set my life in order. For this is to be the principal purpose and first object of my solicitude in writing thy life. This thou hast repeatedly intimated to me, condescending to offer me a living pattern and a mirror without flaw, in which I should see and according to which I should adorn my soul, so as to become worthy to be thy daughter and the bride of thy most holy Son. This shall be my whole object and intention, and therefore I shall not write as a teacher, but as a disciple, not as one instructing, but as one trying to learn, knowing that it is the duty of women to be silent in the Holy Church and to listen to the teachers, 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 34. But as an instrument of the Queen of Heaven, I will declare what she deigns to teach me, and whatever she commands me, for all the souls are capable of receiving the Spirit, which her divine Son has promised to pour out over men of all conditions, Joel chapter 2, verse 28. The souls are also able to communicate it in a befitting manner, whenever a higher authority, acting according to the dispensations of Christ's church, so disposes. I am now convinced that the Church has authorized this history through my superiors, that I should err is possible, and to an ignorant woman natural, but then I err while obeying and not acting of my own free will. Thus I remit myself and subject myself to those who are my guides, and to the correction of the Holy Catholic Church, to whose ministers I fly in all my difficulties. And I wish that my superior, teacher, and confessor be a witness and a censor of this doctrine which I receive, and also a severe and vigilant judge of the manner in which I put it into practice, or fail in the fulfilling of the obligations consequent upon this blessing. Pursuant to the will of the Lord and the command of obedience, I have written for the second time this heavenly history, for during the first writing of it, though the light by which I perceived the mysteries was abundant and fruitful in proportion as my shortcomings were great, my tongue was unequal to the task of finding the proper terms, and my pen not swift enough for a full statement. I omitted some things, and with the lapse of time and by the aid of new enlightenments, I found myself better prepared to write at this second time. Nevertheless, there always remains much of what I understood and have seen, which I must leave unsaid, since to say all will never be possible. Besides these reasons, there was another known to me in the Lord, namely, that in my first writing my mind was much hindered from attending to the matter and arrangement of this work by my temptations and great fears. They raised such tempests of contrary thoughts and suggestions within me that, deeming it the greatest presumption to have attempted such an arduous task, I concluded to burn it. And I believe that this did not happen without the permission of the Lord, for in the turbulency of my soul, I could not present myself in a state entirely befitting and desirable to the Lord for writing and engraving into my heart and spirit his doctrine, as he commands me to do now, and as can be seen from the following event. On one of the festival days of the purification of Our Lady, after having received the most holy sacrament, I wished to celebrate this holy festival, which was the anniversary of my profession, with many acts of thanksgiving and of total resignation to the Most High, who without any merits of mine had chosen me as his spouse. While I was thus exciting these affections, I felt in my interior a most powerful change, accompanied by abundant light, which raised me and urged me strongly and sweetly toward the knowledge of the essence of God, his goodness, perfections, and attributes, and to the disclosing of my own misery, Wisdom chapter 8, verse 1, and these different things which were placed before my understanding at one and the same time, produced in me various effects. The first was that all the attention of my mind and all my aspirations were raised on high. The other effect was that I was humbled in mind to the very dust, in such a way that it seemed to take away my own existence. At the same time, I felt the most vehement sorrow and contrition for my grievous sins, joined to the determination to amend and to renounce all worldly things, aspiring instead toward complete love of God. In these affects I remained as if annihilated, and the greatest pain seemed but consolation, and death but life. The Lord, having pity on my faintness, in sheer mercy, spoke to me, "Be not dismayed, my daughter and spouse, for in order to pardon, to wash, and to purify thee from thy sins, I will apply my infinite merits in the blood which I shed for thee. Animate thyself to desire all perfection in imitation of the life of the most holy Mary. Write it a second time, in order that thou mayest supply what was wanting, and impress her doctrines on thy heart. Do not again irritate my justice, nor show thyself thankless for my mercy, by burning what thou shalt have written, lest my indignation deprive thee of the light which, without thy merits, thou hast received for the manifestation of these mysteries." I immediately thereupon saw the Mother of God, who also spoke to me, "My daughter, as yet thou hast not derived becoming fruit for thy soul from the tree of life, which was offered thee in the writing of my history. Nor didst thou enter into the substance of its contents. Thou hast scarcely yet thought of this hidden manna, nor hast thou attained that perfect and ultimate preparation which the Almighty requires in order to engrave and imprint in a proper manner my virtues into thy soul. I am to give thee the befitting qualities and perfections for that which the divine right hand is to accomplish in thee. I have asked him that, through my intercession and through the abundant graces conferred upon me, I be permitted to adorn thee and compose thy soul, so that thou mayest turn again to the writing of my life, with less attention to the material and more to the spiritual and substantial part of it. Remove the hindrances which oppose the currents of divine grace flowing to thee from the Almighty through me, and make thyself capable of readily accepting the full portion assigned to thee by the divine will. See that thou do not curtail or limit it by shortcomings and imperfections." Thereupon I saw that the Divine Mother clothed me in a garment whiter than the snow and more shining than the sun. And she girded me with a most precious girdle and said, "This is the participation of my purity." I also asked for the infused science of the Lord, which should serve me as most beautiful hair for my adornment, and for other precious gifts and presents, the value which I saw and knew was great, but which I was not able fully to estimate. After having thus adorned me, the heavenly lady said, "Work faithfully and earnestly to imitate me and to be my most perfect daughter, engendered of my spirit, nourished at my breast. I give thee my blessing, in order that in my name and under my direction and assistance thou mayest again resume thy writing." 18. The whole of this holy life of Mary is divided for greater perspicuity into 3 parts. The first treats of all that pertains to the first 15 years of her life, from the moment of her most pure conception until the moment when, in her virginal womb, the eternal Word assumed flesh, including all that the Most High performed for Mary during these years. The second part embraces the mystery of the Incarnation, the whole life of Christ our Lord, his passion and death, and his ascension into heaven, thus describing the life of our Queen, in union with that of her divine Son, and all that she did while living with him. The third part contains the life of the Mother of Grace during the time she lived alone, deprived of the companionship of Christ our Redeemer, until the happy hour of her transition, assumption, and crowning as the Empress of Heaven, where she is to live eternally as the daughter of the Father, the mother of the Son, and the spouse of the Holy Ghost. These 3 parts I subdivided into 8 books, in order that they may be more convenient for use and always remain the subject of my thoughts, the spur of my will, and my meditation day and night. 19. In order to say something of the time in which I wrote this heavenly history, it must be noticed that my father, Brother Francis Coronel, and my mother, Sister Catherine de Arana, my parents, founded in their own house this convent of the Discalced Nuns of the Immaculate Conception by the command and the will of God, which was declared to my mother, Sister Catherine, in a special vision and revelation. This foundation took place on the octave of the Epiphany, January 13th, 1619. On the same day we took the habit, my mother and her 2 daughters, and my father took refuge in the order of our seraphic father St. Francis, in which 2 of his sons had already been living as religious. There he took the habit, made his profession, lived an exemplary life, and died a most holy death. My mother and myself received the veil on the day of the purification of the Queen of Heaven, on the 2nd of February, 1620. On account of the youth of the other daughter, her profession was delayed. The Almighty, in his sheer goodness, favored our family so much that all of us were consecrated to him in the religious state. In the 8th year of the foundation of this convent, in the 25th of my age, in the year of our Lord, 1627, holy obedience imposed upon me the office of abbess, which to this day I unworthily hold. During the first 10 years of the time in which I held this office, I received many commands from the Most High and from the Queen of Heaven to write her holy life, and I continued in fear and doubt to resist these heavenly commands during all that time until the year 1637, when I began to write it the first time. On finishing it, being full of tears and tribulations, and being so counseled by a confessor who directed me during the absence of my regular confessor, I burned all the writing containing not only this history, but many other grave and mysterious matters, for he told me that women should not write in the church. I obeyed his commands promptly, but I had to endure most severe reproaches on this account from my superiors and from the confessor who knew my whole life. In order to force me to rewrite this history, they threatened me with censures. The Most High and the Queen of Heaven also repeated their commands that I obey. During this second writing, so abundant was the light concerning the divine essence, so copious were the blessings of the divine right hand for the renewal and vivification of my soul in the teachings of my heavenly mother, so perfect were the instructions and so exalted were the sacraments communicated to me, that it was necessary to write another book in connection with this history, the title of which will be Laws of the Spouse, Heights of His Divine Love, and Fruits Gathered from the Tree of Life of Most Holy Mary, Our Lady. By divine favor, I begin rewriting this history on the 8th of December, 1655, on the day of the Immaculate Conception. Book 1 treats of the divine foreordainment of Christ and his mother as the highest ideals of all creation, of the creation of the angels and men as their servants, of the lineage of the just men, finally resulting in the Immaculate Conception and birth of the Queen of Heaven, and of her life up to her presentation in the temple. Chapter 1. Concerning 2 special visions vouchsafed to my soul by the Lord, and concerning other enlightenments and mysteries, which compelled me to withdraw from earthly things, and raised my spirit to dwell above the earth. 1. I confess to thee, Matthew chapter 11, verse 25, and to magnify thee, King Most High, that in thy exalted majesty thou hast hidden these high mysteries from the wise and from the teachers, and in thy condescension hast revealed them to me, the most insignificant and useless slave of thy church, in order that thou mayest be the more admired as the omnipotent author of this history, in proportion as its instrument is despicable and weak. 2. After I had overcome the above-mentioned reluctance and disorderly fears which caused so much timid hesitation, lest I suffer shipwreck in that sea of marvels, the most exalted Lord caused me to feel a virtue from on high, strong, sweet, efficacious, and gentle, an enlightenment which illumined the intellect, subjected the rebellious will, tranquilizing, directing, governing, and attracting the whole range of interior and exterior senses, thus subjecting my entire being to the will and pleasure of the Most High, and directing it in all things towards his honor and glory alone. Being thus prepared, I heard a voice from the Almighty, which called me and raised me up toward him, exalting my dwelling place on high. Ecclesiasticus chapter 51, verse 13. And strengthening me against the lions that hungrily roared about me in order to snatch my soul from the enjoyment of great blessings in the boundless mysteries of his holy tabernacle and city of God, surrounded by the sorrows of death and perdition, Psalm 17, verse 5, and beset by the flames of Sodom and Babylon in which we live, it liberated me from the portals of sorrow into which I was enticed to enter. My enemies, forming visions of fallacious and deceitful delights for the misleading of my senses and the capture of them by pretended pleasures, set their allurements about me, in order that I might blindly turn towards these flames and be consumed by them. But from all these snares laid for my footsteps, Psalm 56, verse 7, the Most High has delivered me, elevating my spirit and teaching me by the most efficacious admonitions the way of perfection. He invited me to a life spiritualized and angelic, and obliged me to live so cautiously that in the midst of the furnace the fire touched me not. Ecclesiasticus chapter 51, verse 6. He often liberated me from the impure tongue when it sought to communicate to me its earthly fables. Psalm 118, verse 85. His Majesty invited me to rise from the dust and littleness of the law of sin, to resist the defections of sin-infected nature and restrain its disorders, combating them by his enlightening inspirations, and raising myself above myself. Lamentations chapter 3, verse 28. He called me repeatedly, sometimes by the power of his omnipotence, sometimes with the correction of a father, and at others with the love of a spouse, saying, Arise, my dove, creation of my hands, make haste and come to me. Canticle chapter 2, verse 10. Who am the light and the way, John chapter 8, verse 12. He that follows me walks not in darkness. Come to me, who am the secure truth and unchangeable holiness, to me, who am the powerful and the wise, and the teacher of those that follow wisdom. Wisdom chapter 7, verse 15. 3. These words were like arrows of sweet love, which filled me with admiration, reverence, knowledge, and dread of my sins and of my vileness, so that I retired from his presence, shrunken and annihilated in the knowledge of my nothingness. And the Lord spoke to me, Come, O soul, come to me, who am thy omnipotent God. And although thou hast been a prodigal child and a sinner, arise from the earth and come to me. Thy father, receive the stole of my friendship and the ring of a spouse. 4. Still remaining in that secure retreat of which I have spoken, I saw on a certain day 6 angels, whom the Almighty had appointed to assist and guide me in this undertaking and in other dangers. Coming toward me, they purified and prepared my soul, and then presented me before the Lord. His Majesty gave to my interior being a new light, and as it were a participation in glory, by which I was made capable and desirous of seeing and understanding the things which are above, the powers of a mere terrestrial creature. Soon after, 2 other angels of a still higher order appeared to me, and I felt within me the power of the Lord by which they called me. I understood that they were most mysterious envoys, and that they wished to reveal to me high and hidden sacraments. Eagerly I responded, and desirous of enjoying the blessing which they pointed out to me, I declared to them how ardently I longed to see what they wished to show me, and yet so mysteriously concealed from me. Then they at once answered with great serenity, Restrain thyself, O soul. I turned to the great princes of heaven and said, Princes of the Almighty, and messengers of the great King, why do you now detain me, contrary to my will, and why do you defer my joy and my delight after you have called me? What force is this of yours, and what power which calls me, fills me with fervor, which allures and yet detains me, which attracts me to follow after the odor of my beloved Lord and of his ointments, and yet restrains me with strong bonds? Tell me the cause of all this. They answered, because in order to be instructed in all these mysteries, thou must needs, O soul, come with bare feet, and despoiled of all thy desires and passions, for these mysteries do not accommodate or lend themselves to disordered inclinations. Take off thy shoes like Moses, Exodus chapter 3, verse 5, for such was the command given to him before he could see the wonderful bush. Princes of heavens and my lords, I answered, much was asked of Moses when he received the command to perform the works of an angel, while yet living in mortal flesh. But he was a saint, and I am but a sinner full of miseries. My heart is disturbed, and I am in conflict with the slavery and the oppression of sin, which I feel in my members, and which are opposed to the law of the Spirit. Romans chapter 7, verse 23. To which they rejoined, Soul, it would indeed be for thee a most difficult enterprise, if thou hadst to execute it merely with thy own power. But the Most High, who wishes to see in thee this disposition, is powerful, and he will not deny to thee this his help, if from thy heart thou ask his assistance, and thou prepare thyself to receive it. And his power, which caused the bush to burn, and at the same time prevented it from being consumed, can prevent also the fire of the passions which encompass and beset the soul from consuming it, if it truly desires to be saved. His Majesty asks for that which he desires, and can execute what he asks. Strengthened by him, thou canst do that which he commands. Phil, chapter 4, verse 13. Take off thy shoes and weep in bitter sorrow. Call out to him from the bottom of thy heart, in order that thy prayers may be heard, and thy desires fulfilled. 5. Presently, I saw a most precious veil covering a treasure, and my heart burned with desire to see it raised, and to look upon the sacred mystery which I understood was hidden beneath. My desire was answered in the following manner. Obey, O soul, in what was enjoined and commanded thee. Despoil thyself of thyself, and then this mystery will be revealed to thee. I resolved to amend my life and to overcome my appetite. I sighed and wept with many aspirations from my inmost soul for the manifestation of this blessing. While I made my good resolves, the veil which covered the treasure began to be lifted. Presently, the veil fell entirely, and my interior eyes saw what I shall not know how to describe in words. I saw a great and mysterious sign in heaven. I saw a woman, a most beautiful lady and queen, crowned with the stars, clothed with the sun, and the moon was at her feet. Apocalypse chapter 12, verse 1. The holy angels spoke to me. This is that blessed woman whom Saint John saw in the Apocalypse, and in whom are enclosed, deposited, and sealed up the wonderful mysteries of the redemption. So much has the Most High, powerful God favored this creature, that we, his angelic spirits, are full of astonishment. Contemplate and admire her prerogatives. Record them in writing, because that is the purpose for which, according to the measure suitable to thy circumstances, they will be made manifest to thee. I was made to see such wonders that the greatness of them took away my speech, and my admiration of them suspended my other faculties. Nor do I think that all the created beings in this mortal life will ever comprehend them, as will appear in the sequel of my discourse. 6. On another day, while my soul sweetly tarried in the aforesaid habitation, I heard a voice from the Most High saying, My spouse, I desire that thou rouse thyself in earnest to seek me, and to love me with fervor, that thou make thy life more angelic than human, and that thou forget entirely the terrestrial affairs. I wish to raise thee as one that is poor from the dust, and as one full of need from the dunghill. Psalm 112, verse 7. So that while I exalt thee, thou mayest humiliate thyself, and the nard of thy sweet odor may remain in my presence. Knowing thy own misery, be thou convinced from the bottom of thy heart that thou meritest for thyself only tribulation and humiliation. Consider my greatness and thy littleness. Remember that I am just and holy. I deal with thee considerately, making use rather of my mercy, and not chastising thee as thou deservest. Strive to build upon this foundation of humility all the other virtues in order to fulfill my wishes. I appoint my Virgin Mother to teach, correct, and reprehend thee. She will spur thee onward and accompany thy footsteps according to my liking and pleasure. While the Most High spoke to me, the Queen stood nearby, and the heavenly princess disdained not to accept the office which His Majesty assigned to her. She accepted it benignly and said to me, My daughter, I desire that thou be my disciple and my companion, and I will be thy teacher. But remember that thou must obey me courageously, and from this day on no vestige of a daughter of Adam must be found in thee. My conduct and my works during my pilgrimage on earth, and the wonders which the arm of the Almighty wrought through me, shall be the mirror and the model of thy life. I prostrated myself before the throne of the King and Queen of the universe, and I offered to obey her in all things. I gave thanks to the Highest for the favor which He, so much in excess of my merits, conferred upon me in giving me such a guide and protectress. Into her hands I renewed the vows of my profession. I offered myself to her and proposed to work anew at the amendments of my life. Again the Lord spoke to me, Behold and see. Turning, I saw a most beautiful ladder with many rungs. Around it were many angels, and a great number of them were ascending and descending upon it. His Majesty said to me, This is the mysterious ladder of Jacob, the house of God, and the portal of heaven. Genesis chapter 28, verse 17. If thou wilt earnestly strive to live irreprehensible in my eyes, thou wilt ascend upon it to me. 8. This promise incited my desires, set my will aflame, and enraptured my spirit. With many tears I grieved that I should be a burden to myself in my sinfulness. Job chapter 7, verse 20. I sighed for the end of my captivity, and longed to arrive there where there would be no obstacle to my love. In this anxiety, I passed some days, trying to reform my life. I again made a general confession and corrected some of my imperfections. The vision of the ladder continued without intermission, but it was not explained to me. I made many promises to the Lord, and proposed to free myself from all terrestrial things, and to reserve the power of my will entirely for His love, without allowing it to incline toward any creature, be it ever so small or unsuspicious. I repudiated all visible and sensible things, having passed some days in these affections and sentiments. I was informed by the Most High that the ladder signified the life of the Most Holy Virgin, its virtues and sacraments. His Majesty said to me, I desire, my spouse, that thou ascend this stair of Jacob, and enter through this door of heaven to acquire the knowledge of my attributes, and occupy thyself in the contemplation of my divinity. Arise then, and walk, ascend by it to me. These angels which surround it and accompany it are those that I appointed as the guardians of Mary, as the defenders and sentinels of the citadel of Sion. Consider her attentively, and meditating on her virtues, seek to imitate them. It seemed to me then that I ascended the ladder, and that I recognized the great wonders and the ineffable prodigies of the Lord in a mere creature, and the greatest sanctity and perfection of virtue ever worked by the arm of the Almighty. At the top of the ladder I saw the Lord of hosts and the Queen of all creation. They commanded me to glorify, exalt, and praise Him on account of these great mysteries, and to write down so much of them as I might bring myself to understand. The exalted and high Lord gave me a law, written not only on tablets as He gave to Moses, Exodus chapter 31, verse 18, but one wrought by His omnipotent finger in order that it might be studied and observed, Psalm chapter 1, verse 2. Psalm 1, verse 2. He moved my will so that in her presence I promised to overcome my repugnance, and with her assistance to set about writing her history. Nay, with her assistance, paying attention to three things. First, to remember that the creature must ever seek to acknowledge the profound reverence due to God, and to abase itself in proportion to the condescension of His Majesty toward men, and that the effect of greater favors and benefits must be a greater fear, reverence, attention, and humility. Secondly, to be ever mindful of the obligation of all men, who are so forgetful of their own salvation, to consider and learn what they owe to the Queen and Mother of Piety, on account of the part assumed by her in the redemption, to think of the love and the reverence which she showed to God, and the honor in which we are to hold this great lady. Thirdly, to be willing to have my spiritual director, and if necessary the whole world, find out my littleness and vileness, and the small returns which I make for what I receive. 9. To these my protestations the Most Holy Virgin answered, My daughter, the world stands much in need of this doctrine, for it does not know, nor does it practice, the reverence due to the Lord Omnipotent. On account of this ignorance, his justice is provoked to afflict and humiliate men. They are sunken in their carelessness and filled with darkness, not knowing how to seek relief or attain to the light. This, however, is justly their lot, since they fail in the reverence and fear which they ought to have. Besides this, the Most High and the Queen gave me many other instructions in order to make clear to me their will in regard to this work. It seemed to me temerity and want of charity toward myself to reject the instruction which she had promised me for narrating the course of her most holy life. It seemed equally improper to put off the writing of it, since the Most High had intimated this as the fitting and opportune time, saying to me in this regard, My daughter, when I sent my only begotten, the world, with the exception of the few souls that serve me, was in the worst condition that it had ever been since its beginning. For human nature is so imperfect that if it does not subject itself to the interior guidance of my light, and to the fulfillment of the precepts of my ministers, by sacrificing its own judgment and following me, who am the way, the truth, and the life, John chapter 14, verse 6, and by carefully observing my commandments in order not to lose my friendship, it will presently fall into the abyss of darkness and innumerable miseries, until it arrives at obstinacy in sin. From the creation and sin of the first man until I gave the law to Moses, men governed themselves according to their own inclinations, and fell into many errors and sins. Romans chapter 8. Verse 13. After having received the law, they again committed sin by not obeying it. John chapter 7, verse 19. And thus they lived on, separating themselves more and more from the truth and light, and arriving at the state of complete forgetfulness. In fatherly love, I sent them eternal salvation and a remedy for the incurable infirmities of human nature, thus justifying my cause. And just as I then chose the opportune time for the great manifestation of my mercy, so I now select this time for showing toward them another very great favor. For now the hour has come, and the opportune time to let men know the just cause of my anger, and they are now justly charged and convinced of their guilt. Now I will make manifest my indignation and exercise my justice and equity. I will show how well justified is my cause, in order that this may come to pass more speedily, and because it is now time that my mercy show itself more openly, and because my love must not be idle, I will offer to them an opportune remedy, if they will but make use of it, for returning again to my favor. Now, at this hour, when the world has arrived at so unfortunate a pass, and when, though the Word has become incarnate, mortals are more careless of their weal and seek it less, when the day of their transitory life passes swiftly at the setting of the sun of time, when the night of eternity is approaching, closer and closer for the wicked, and the day without a night is being born for the just, when the majority of mortals are sinking deeper and deeper into the darkness of their ignorance and guilt, oppressing the just and mocking the children of God, when my holy and divine law is despised in the management of the iniquitous affairs of state, which are as hostile as they are contrary to my providence, when the wicked least deserve my mercy, in these predestined times, I wish to open a portal for the just ones, through which they can find access to my mercy. I wish to give them a light by which they can dispel the gloom that envelops the eyes of their minds. I wish to furnish them a suitable remedy for restoring them to my grace. Happy they who find it, and blessed they who shall appreciate its value. Rich they who shall come upon this treasure, and blessed and very wise those who shall search into and shall understand its marvels and hidden mysteries.